I do not know if anyone else feels this the same way right now, but it honestly feels like the Canucks are standing at one of those massive turning points again. You can feel it. The pressure around this team is different right now. The front office is changing. The direction of the franchise feels uncertain. And now there are two huge stories coming out of Vancouver that could seriously shape what this organization looks like for the next several years. And the thing is, one of these stories could completely change who is running this team behind the scenes moving forward, while the other one involves a player that used to feel untouchable in this city. A player fans believed would lead this franchise for the next decade. That is why today feels big, because these are not just random off-season updates anymore. These are the kinds of decisions that can either push this team closer to becoming a real contender again or drag this whole thing into another frustrating cycle that Canucks fans are honestly exhausted of living through. And once we get into the details here, you will understand why people around the league are suddenly paying very close attention to Vancouver again. But before we jump into both stories, if you are a real Canucks fan and you actually ride through all the highs and lows with this team, do me a quick favor. Hit the like button and subscribe to Canucks Nation Report. The channel is still brand new. We are trying to reach our first 2,000 subscribers. And honestly, most people watching these videos still are not subscribed yet. So let us see if this fan base can build something strong here from the start and prove how passionate Canucks fans really are. The first major story is about Ryan Johnson. And honestly, this feels like one of the most important organizational decisions the Canucks have made in years. After all the speculation, all the interviews, all the reports about outside candidates, it now looks like Ryan Johnson is set to become the new head of hockey operations for the Vancouver Canucks following Jim Rutherford's transition away from the role. And what is interesting is, this might actually be where the Canucks were heading the entire time. According to reports from Rick Dhaliwal at Czech TV, Elliot Friedman from Sportsnet, and Irfan Ghaffar from Canucks Army, Johnson is now expected to take over the hockey side of the organization. Multiple sources around the league are saying the same thing, and honestly, when you look at everything that has happened behind the scenes, it starts making a lot of sense. Jim Rutherford reportedly spoke with 17 or 18 different candidates during the search process. That is a massive search. But in the end, nobody apparently stood out more than Ryan Johnson, somebody who has already been inside the organization for more than a decade. And that history matters. Johnson first joined the Canucks back in 2013 as a development coach. Then he became director of player development in 2017, while also taking over as general manager of the Canucks AHL affiliate in Utica. Since then, he has basically climbed every level of the organization step by step. He later became special assistant to the general manager in 2022, then assistant GM in 2024, and now he looks ready to become the guy leading hockey operations altogether. What stands out to me here is that this is not some random outside hire trying to learn the organization from scratch. Ryan Johnson already knows everything happening internally. He has been part of development, scouting, roster discussions, AHL management, player growth, all of it. And remember, after the Jim Benning era ended, Johnson was actually one of the few remaining management people who truly understood the day-to-day operations of the organization. Alongside Stan Smile and the Seiden twins, Daniel Seiden and Henrik Seiden, he became one of the key holdovers helping stabilize things during the transition period. But unlike some others, Johnson also had real involvement with player transactions and roster management, which made him even more valuable to Rutherford over the years. Now fast forward to today, and this move also comes after Jim Rutherford dismissed Patrik Allvin at the end of the 2025 to 2026 season. And honestly, that still feels shocking to say out loud because Allvin was supposed to be a major part of this front office for years. Apparently, Rutherford even offered Allvin another role with the organization as essentially a super scout. But reports suggest Patrik Allvin is unlikely to accept it. And another interesting layer here is what happened with Evan Gold from the Boston Bruins organization. For several days, reports were heavily linking Gold to the Canucks job. A lot of people around the league believed he was becoming the preferred candidate after the interview process. Then suddenly, everything changed. Now, nobody really knows exactly why Gold fell out of the picture so quickly, but all signs now point back to Johnson being the choice all along. And honestly, from a stability perspective, I actually understand it. The Canucks are entering one of the most important drafts this franchise has had in years. Vancouver owns the 3rd overall pick next month, plus another late first-round pick acquired from the Minnesota Wild in the Quinn Hughes trade, along with 2 second-round picks. That is massive. This draft could literally shape the next era of Canucks hockey. The organization clearly wants to get younger, develop talent properly, and give opportunities to young players over the next few seasons. So, having somebody like Ryan Johnson, who has spent years working directly in player development, probably gives ownership and management more confidence heading into this transition. And sources are already saying Johnson has been heavily involved in meetings with both the pro scouting staff and amateur scouts over the last week, which honestly feels like another major clue that the decision has basically already been made internally. The Sedins are also expected to take on larger roles in hockey operations moving forward, stepping away from some of the coaching responsibilities they have held the last few years. Their exact titles still have not been confirmed yet, but if Johnson officially gets the job, it sounds like Daniel and Henrik Sedin will become major voices inside the organization. And honestly, as a Canucks fan, that part feels important emotionally too. Because for years, fans have wanted hockey people around this organization who genuinely understand Vancouver, understand pressure here, understand what this fan base expects, and understand what winning in this city would actually mean. Now the big question becomes what happens next with assistant general managers Emily Castonguay and Cami Granato. Castonguay has been heavily involved with contracts and salary cap management, so there is a strong belief she will remain part of the organization. Meanwhile, Granato has been leading scouting and development departments, so her future role will also be something fans watch closely. And really, this entire front office story connects directly into the second massive story surrounding Elias Pettersson, because whatever direction this management group chooses next could completely define Pettersson's future in Vancouver. And honestly, this is where things start getting uncomfortable, because now the noise around Elias Pettersson is getting louder again, and this time it does not feel like normal off-season speculation anymore. Former Stanley Cup winning executive Brian Burke openly said he believes somebody around the league would still trade for Pettersson despite the contract situation and the recent decline in production. And when a respected hockey voice like Brian Burke says something like that publicly, people pay attention. Because now the conversation shifts from could the Canucks trade Pettersson to are the Canucks eventually going to feel forced to consider it? That is a completely different discussion. And the reason this situation feels so dangerous right now is because of the contract attached to everything. Elias Pettersson carries an $11.6 million cap hit, and there are still 6 years left on the deal. That is an enormous commitment. A few years ago, nobody cared because Pettersson looked like a franchise superstar. He put up 102 points in the 2022-2023 season, then followed it with 89 points the next year, before signing the massive long-term extension. At that time, fans believed Vancouver had locked up its future superstar centerpiece. But since signing the contract, things have changed dramatically. Pettersson has now followed that extension with back-to-back 15-goal seasons while averaging only 48 points per year. And that drop-off is impossible to ignore anymore. That is why Brian Burke's comments hit so hard. Burke basically said somebody in the NHL will probably still gamble on Pettersson because teams convince themselves every year that they can fix talented players. But he also admitted that if he personally ran a team, he would not want to touch that contract with 6 years remaining. And honestly, that is the terrifying part for Vancouver. Because the Canucks are stuck in this brutal middle ground right now, if they trade Elias Pettersson today, there is a real chance they would be selling low on one of the most gifted players this organization has ever developed. But if they keep waiting and Pettersson struggles again next season, that contract could become even harder to move later. That is the gamble. And now, Adam Foote gets pulled directly into this situation too, because the decision surrounding Pettersson impacts literally everything about the roster moving forward. Line combinations, salary cap flexibility, team identity, long-term direction, all of it. This is not just about one player anymore. This is about deciding what kind of team Vancouver actually wants to become over the next several years. Do they still believe Elias Pettersson can return to being the elite player we saw before the contract, or are they starting to quietly believe the safer move is getting out before the situation gets even heavier, financially and emotionally? And honestly, I think that is why this offseason feels so tense around the Canucks right now. You have got a possible new hockey boss in Ryan Johnson, preparing to shape the future of the organization, while at the exact same time, the franchise's biggest player question continues hanging over everything. Quick side note too. If you have been enjoying these Canucks discussions, make sure you subscribe to Canucks Nation Report because more than 90% of people watching still are not subscribed yet. The channel is still new. We are trying to hit our first 2,000 subscribers, and it would be awesome to build a real Canucks community here with people who genuinely follow this team every day. But getting back to Pettersson, I honestly think this is one of the hardest situations the organization has faced in years. Because talent like Elias Pettersson does not just disappear overnight. Players around the league still remember how dominant he looked during his peak seasons. There are no major concerns about his work ethic or attitude either, which matters. But at the same time, this league moves fast. And when you are making $11.6 million per season, people stop judging you based on potential and start judging you based on production immediately. That is just reality in today's NHL. So now Vancouver enters an offseason where two enormous questions are sitting right in front of the organization. Can Ryan Johnson successfully guide this franchise into a smarter long-term direction? And what exactly are the Canucks going to do with Elias Pettersson? Because whether fans want to admit it or not, the answer to that second question could define this franchise for the next decade. If Pettersson bounces back, suddenly Vancouver still has a legitimate elite centerpiece player to build around. If he does not, this entire organization could be forced into difficult decisions nobody wanted to make just a couple years ago. And honestly, that is why these two stories feel connected to me. The Canucks are entering a completely new phase right now. A new leadership structure, a younger organizational direction, more pressure on development, more pressure on draft decisions, and massive uncertainty surrounding one of the biggest contracts in franchise history. This offseason could seriously change everything for Vancouver. And as Canucks fans, all we can really hope right now is that the people making these decisions finally get them right, because this fan base has waited way too long to see this team become a true Stanley Cup contender again. Anyway, let me know what you honestly think down in the comments. Do you like the idea of Ryan Johnson taking over hockey operations? And what would you do with Elias Pettersson if you were running the Canucks right now? And if you are still watching and you have not subscribed yet, definitely join us here on Canucks Nation Report. The channel is still brand new. We are pushing toward our first 2,000 subscribers, and a huge number of Canucks fans watching these videos still have not subscribed yet. So, if you truly follow this team through everything, help us build a strong Canucks community here from the beginning. We will keep following every move this offseason together.